My fellow Amberlanders, I'm glad to be here tonight with each and every one of you. I want to thank you all for your sacrifices. Today we are going to have a long talk, a long conversation, which I dubbed the war address. Because as I remind you constantly, Ambazonia is at war. If you flip your thinking about that, you lose your consciousness and your posture. So it is always critical to remind yourself that you are at war. It is going to invoke your survival instinct and keep you safe and keep you in resistance mode. So today we're going to have a long conversation about where we are in our war of independence, what we need to do, and what we have so far achieved. I can assure you without any doubt that you have achieved the greatest feat in modern history in the way you've conducted yourself, in the way you've challenged Cameroon's claim over Amazonia, and most importantly, in the way you have moved the goalposts from making Amazonia a domestic issue of the occupying power to an issue where great powers, irrespective of what they say, are talking about. Very few people in modern history, hemlocked by two powerful countries who've denied them their right to self-determination, have been able to pull this kind of an achievement. So we're going to have a deep reflection about our war of independence, but you should know the Nyamfukas who invaded our country in 1961 have been humiliated, and it's just a matter of time before the last remnants of their forces are bundled out of our country. A lot has been happening, and we will talk about those things. We will do some analysis on the issues of international negotiation, where we are, and why people like us, who have made ourselves relevant through sacrifice and endurance on the ground, shouldn't be begging, the occupier to come to the table. Cameroon should be sending a letter to us begging to come and talk about its exit from our homeland. The way your posture is at the international system will determine whether you are respected as a partner, or you would simply be defined as an agitator willing to alter systems and to find a space within those systems. So we're going to do those analyses. In negotiations, you have to get it right. Otherwise, the international system is going to use you to restore status quo, and it becomes business as usual. But before I'm going to start today, in the past weeks, we lost Molanjo Litome, the person we term the Amazonian Encyclopedia, one of the bravest Bakwarians, our finest brain. I've known Mullah for more than 30 years. We've had our ups and downs, but together we've believed in the independence of our country. We fought on the ground together, took part in several meetings, worked together in preparing the team that was going to the United Nations. I was at the Mongo Bridge when they were back. Mullah was there. He's been a guy who has been a towering figure, a giant, an elephant in the room, whose absence is, all of us are going to take notice. Until his dying days, when he could not even walk, he still took the time to make sure he showed us what is meant by sacrifice. He sacrificed most of his adult life to make sure we have the kind of life he had. Mullah was one of our finest first chartered accountant. who built his own little space based on accountability. And he worked extremely very hard to make sure that we can restore the kind of system what one of our comrades call a lost civilization. We wish Mullah farewell, and we know he's gonna go meet the others who've gone before him, and they are going to bond together to be the spirit that guides us through these very difficult times in the history of our own country. We send our condolences as Amazonians to Mullah's family, and we know that at the time Mullah passed away, I think his brother, sister were also at the mortuary. It's been a difficult time for the Litumbe family, and I call on all of you Amazonians never to forget all these people who sacrifice a lot. We seem always want to rewrite history to fit our times, forgetting those who've sacrificed a lot. Before him, you had a lot of people who've lost their lives. Pam Binglos, who sacrificed a lot. You had Tanin Daniel, who died in Kondengi in 1996. Fai Lawrence, who was murdered in Kondengi, 1996. Pa Zakaria Khan, 1999. Julius Ngundi, 1999. All of these brave men, we should never forget the sacrifices they made. We should never rewrite history to fit our times. Otherwise, the next generation is going to do the same. We honor them. Ambazonia will forever honor all its sons and daughters, all those who've sacrificed a lot to make sure we have a space in our own country. We thank you very much. We thank your families for the sacrifices they made, for the time and the support they gave you in your strive to make sure that 8 million people within our own territorial space and beyond our shores enjoy the kind of freedom that we had in 1960. I also like to remember our fallen heroes this week. Yesterday we lost 2 soldiers of the Amazonian Defense Forces. I give you salute for your bravery, soldiers on the ground. In the past 48 hours, there has been no sleep for all of us. We have been following battles in Batibo. We've been following battles in Ashang today. We've been following battles in Pinyin, battles in Ewai, battles in Ambo, and different places. We remember our warriors also who died in the Atlantic states. Every day we watch the bodies, the lifelike bodies of our soldiers mauled down by an occupying power who insists on governing us without a consent. For these brave men and women who continue to give their lives for our country, we will never forget. It is not only because of Ambazonia that we fight. We fight also to make sure your lives were not lost in vain. And for us who are still alive, we'll continue to commit, rededicate, and focus to the liberation of our country. Farewell to all of you. I also want to take time to remember our prisoners, the brave warriors who sacrificed their liberty to make sure Ambazonia is free. Thousands and thousands of our people have been kidnapped from the land of their birth, transported by an illegal occupier into their dungeons where they are detaining, communicado, deprived of their liberty, kept under inhuman and degrading condition, molested, psychologically tortured. We may sometimes think of these prisoners as our sacrificial lamb, that because they are in jail, it gives our cause a justification. We sometimes see them as an instrument to the outcome that we so much deserve or we think we deserve. These are Ambazonians who shouldn't be in jail, who should be with their families, who should be fighting for their country. We will not accept that any Ambazonian is locked up, deprived of his or her liberty by an illegal occupier who shouldn't have been in our country in the first place. We hail you, brave patriots. We thank you for your continuous sacrifices. We think about you on a daily basis. We remember the pain you went through, being subjected to torture and humiliation to betray your own comrades. We know most of you are still in resistance mode. Most of you are still glued on a daily basis on the idea that one day you will return home, a home freer than you left. Be rest assured that for us left behind, we are going to continuously invest our time and dedicate our resources to ensure that Amazonia is free and you can come home to a free country. Thank you very much. I want to go straight into, I've prepared a couple of notes today so I don't miss any point I want to talk about. As you may know, in the past days, most of us read, a widely circulated press statement, including newspaper reports about a supposed state of United Nations Organization State of Cameroon. And I know many people were worried and even confused. And you shouldn't be confused. In times like the moment, you're going to face a lot of things that will confuse you. And some of them are designed to inject a new narrative and an uncertainty. So you lose track and focus. The supposed notion of a United Nations State of Cameroon is absurd. It's absurd. I would say that with utmost clarity and strength. We all know that, Northern Cameroons, former Northern Cameroons, which is now part of Nigeria, was all together with British Southern Cameroons, what we call the British Northern Cameroons. And that territory had long been separated. And we also know, I think, more than 20 years ago, there were people within our territory who thought our struggle was so difficult because we were trying to gain independence only on the British Southern Cameroons, and that if we combine the British Northern Cameroons and British Southern Cameroons to what was termed then as British Cameroons, it will be easy for us to gain independence. It is something we rejected clearly because we are dealing with an international structure, an international state that has borders clearly demarcated by treaties. And so to recast, our eyes beyond our own shores will be venturing in uncharted territory. And so we have definitely rejected this notion. And many times, proponents of these ideas had circulated false information talking about UN presence in Amazonia to demarcate borders. They talked about UN issuing ID cards. And this was most especially in the state of Bui, where we had persons who supported these ideas highly convinced that there was a possibility to regain the independence of supposed British Cameroon. As I wrote in my post in 2004, when I sneaked myself into Amberland, I held a meeting with late Dr. Yombang, may his soul rest in perfect peace, and Professor Martin Chia. And this meeting took place at the premises of late Albert Womamokon at Commercial Avenue. And so Martin Chia and Dr. Yombang came up there to brief me on this supposed wonderful idea. And after listening to Professor Chia, I made it clear to him that his idea was almost like a fantasy, like something that was conjured and concocted, substantiated time and again, hoping that the gullible will buy into it. And that the focus for our struggle should be for the liberation of Amazonia. And he was very much unconvincing. And based on law, based on practice, based on all what we know, that idea should be dead and buried. And all the proponents of that idea, are playing hanky-panky, with the emotions of the Amazonian people. So I'll call upon all of you to remain focused to the Amazonian struggle that is gaining international traction, that is rooted in international treaty, that is based on a people recognized by, the outcome of the 2003 Banjul submission. That is, a people who had a civilization highly respected their own government, the first country that introduced the notion of alteration of power peacefully within the continent of Africa. And this is the space within which we think, our destiny lies. And the focus on this is critical for a speedy end of Cameroon's occupation. So I just wanted to make this abundantly clear to our people, not to be derailed by any injection of alternative narratives meant to serve the occupier and, to distract a population that is already at urge. Our population is at urge, and the introduction of any new narrative and keeps everyone confused. So remain focused. Your revolution, your war of independence, as someone would prefer, your war of liberation, is on track, and you've dealt a blow on Cameroon. I'd like to make reaction on a couple of other issues. A statement of Mr. Ambassador Cohen. Ambassador Cohen has been a highly respected, and I still think a highly respected United States diplomat. He was a prominent figure in the issue of the Eritrean struggle. He was the guy who told the Eritreans, you can never be independent. He said it clearly, because that was the American position. The American policy position with respect to Eritrea was that Eritrea was part of Ethiopia, and the idea of a separate Eritrea was uncalled for and unattainable. And Ambassador Cohen was the principal guy who battled for the United States. But as we all know today, Eritrea is free because of dogged determination and sacrifices of the Eritrean people. We all are witnesses today of the artifacts, remnants of their war of independence. And so when Cohen says, La République cannot defeat Ambazonia, and that's true. This is an invader. Cameroon is an invading country. Cameroon is the weakest country in terms of its military abilities in the continent of Africa. It's the weakest country. Balikumba alone can defeat Cameroon. Balikumba alone. I'm talking about the warriors. Balinyonga alone can defeat Cameroon. So if Cohen says Cameroon cannot defeat Ambazonia, that's obvious. Cameroon has never won any war. It uses genocide to get victory. Even the UPCs would have defeated Cameroon without the support of the French. So it's a weak, decayed, bankrupt country that cannot defeat Ambazonia. Not only because it is weak, because it is an invader that has invaded our country and has not done anything to warrant any respect. It has muffled our ideas and our ideals, our norms and values, and introduced an archaic system that is unsustainable. So I agree with Ambassador Cohen that Cameroon cannot defeat Ambazonia. That's a fact. And the second part of his statement, which I think must be rejected outrightly, is the claim that Ambazonia cannot win this war. It must. I would like to take you back on two things. Conflicts end through two ways. Negotiated settlement or outright victory of one party. Even in situations that is perceived as stalemate, there is a victor. And when we look at where we started with Cameroon, one moment please. When we look at where we started with Cameroon, Cameroon declared war on us, and Mr. Biya said within a few months he was going to crush Ambazonia. We set out, our war objective clearly. We said we will make our territory ungovernable for Cameroon. Because, as I have said repeatedly, occupation is predicated on political governance, economic exploitation and extortion, banditry, to say the least. And we set out our objectives. Make Ambazonia ungovernable, to undermine the concept of political legitimacy and political governance. We made Ambazonia ungovernable. That was a battle in the war we won. We went in saying to ourselves, this is a country that we provide almost 60% of the GDP. Its premise of occupying our country is based, to a greater extent on the exploitation of our resources. And one of our war objectives was to reduce that level of exploitation to the point where its presence became non-beneficial. And we have highly reduced Cameroon's power of exploitation. We've shut down to a certain extent CDC. We've reduced the exploitation of timber. We've reduced the amount of money Cameroon makes through taxation within our territory. So, based on that premise, we achieve our war objective. We achieve our war objective. We set out from the beginning, saying to the world, for more than 6 years, Cameroon has designed a system where it could have its way one way or the other. It made our struggle, it made our campaign for decolonization a domestic affair of Cameroon's parliament and executive office. And one of our war objectives was to internationalize our struggle to the extent where our strategy of self-defense and internationalization will move this struggle from the hands of Cameroon and place it at the level of the international system where a certain level of fairness could be achieved. We achieved that war objective. Cameroon's military governors are all in armored cars, or they are all dressed up in military fatigues. DOs have escaped their posts. Military police stations ransacked, burned down. And so Cameroon is defeated. Actually defeated. We didn't come into this revolution, or our strategy of self-defense was not to take territory, hold, proclaim something, and then claim that we have taken over Amazonia. We didn't design our strategy to involve that at the preliminary stages because we did not want to present a battlefield for Cameroon where it will massacre our soldiers and our people. We knew we could hold our territory in a dynamic fashion where we do not have any expenses in terms of running hospitals, in terms of paying civil servants. We take away that possibility of Cameroon having control, but Cameroon still spends the money in those expenses. So totally we reject Mr. Cohen's supposition or claim that Amazonia cannot win this war. We have already defeated Cameroon on all the issues that we set out to achieve. That we have not been recognized as an independent state is not in the hands of Amazonians. Only different countries, different international institutions can recognize Amazonia. So if Mr. Cohen says we have not won the battle for recognition, that is true. But that we have not defeated Cameroon, all the indicators show that Cameroon has been defeated. That is why it has become so angry, burning down villages, murdering people, committing genocide in our country. Another issue I would like to react on is the Oxford University research outcome. My fellow Ambazonians, it is very important that we understand that the issue of political legitimacy is very important in the creation of states, even in the recognition of states. That is why in most liberation wars, it has always ended in referenda to determine whether the claim for sovereignty or for independence has legitimacy. That means has popular support. In 1995, we conducted what we call the signature referendum to determine, because Yaoundé always said the claim for independence was just a claim of a few people. Just a few people were agitating about independence. So we decided to conduct a signature referendum We, and we came out with an overwhelming support for independence. More than 90% of those who filled that form said clearly that, indicated that they wanted an independent Amazonia. Even though we didn't need to do that, because we do not, even if there are just a few Amazonians who say today we want our homeland, they have a right to it, because we've been a free people, an independent state that was invaded by our neighbor. But why I'm bringing this with respect to the Oxford research outcome and its recommendation is because legitimacy plays a role in the alteration of policies by governments. When governments are able to determine that a struggle has popular support, it is easy for them to change their policies towards that struggle. But that only happens if that particular struggle has political impact or some level of moral impact in that particular society. Say, for example, genocide is happening and a country, just stays quiet. The population of that country can force that government to look at what is happening in that particular space. That is trying to make the government have some sense of moral obligation to what is happening in that space. And within the context of, let's say, the examination of genocide, most countries tend to now examine the root causes of what led to the genocide in the first place. The second issue that is critical for governments to change their policies is independent research outcomes. Because sometimes our political positions might be seen as manipulated, might be seen as simply subjective. Research outcomes are critical because they are outcomes out of investigations with a rigid methodology, that is, the method of arriving at such conclusions has been seen as valid, reliable. And so most research outcomes within the Western Hemisphere account to a large extent in the alteration of government policies. That is why the Oxford research on our case is critical, and that's why I'm reacting to it. It's critical for a couple of reasons, and I want to look at a couple of those reasons. In the Oxford research, they wrote about the issue of moral equivalence in the actions of Amazonian fighters and in the actions of Cameroon forces. You remember each time I go for interviews, the journalists always try to raise the specter of, Amazonian fighters are also engaged in acts of killings, torture. And it's like comparing the actions of Cameroon's forces that under international law amounts to crimes like crimes against humanity, genocide, war crimes, crimes of aggression, to unsystematic actions of soldiers of our defense forces. And that's what, the Oxford research warned against by making this moral equivalence of comparing Amazonians' action with the actions of Cameroon that should amount to crimes against humanity and genocide, was doing a disservice, to the conflict. And the world should take note of this, and everyone should take note of this. We do not absolutely say there are no actions being committed by our forces that are reprehensible, that must be condemned, that should lead to people being held accountable for their actions. But to compare the actions of Cameroon, which is deliberate, systematic in nature, to some of those little actions that happen within our own territory, is doing a disservice, to the conflict and making it extremely very difficult for any resolution of the conflict to be found. So this is where we are really happy about. And secondly, the Oxford research basically also focus on the historical realities that have led to the war between Ambazonia and Cameroon. The issue of decolonization. You cannot examine, the current conflict in isolation to the historical realities of the formation of the state of Cameroon and that of Ambazonia. That is why each time we have talked about the international presence, it is because there are issues that will be easily resolved once you have international actors that have historical presence in the issue of the decolonization process of Ambazonia and even that of Cameroon. So we commend this Oxford, paper in a very good way. Another point which they made in one of their 5 recommendations, recommendations number 5, and this touches on the issue of legitimacy, which I talked about. They said clearly, and this is what I will talk about also when I deal with the issue of negotiation. When you realize most foreign countries are unable to make it abundantly clear that Ambazonians have the right to self-determination. And the Oxford recommendation warned against the exclusion of independence from any international negotiation. Because based on their investigation, they also concluded, based on the number of people they interviewed, that the majority of our people want independence. And they want to exclude independence in the narrative of foreign governments and even on the issue of negotiation will be contrary to the spirit of democracy, to the spirit of political legitimacy in finding solutions to intractable conflicts. So this has been extremely very good for Amazonia. I know there are many other institutes that are doing research on our struggle. We've got institutes in Holland that have for long research on the Amazonian issue and published, papers and books on our subject. And I think these publications, peer review articles, books and journal articles are critical in forming the positions of foreign governments, especially when a research ends with recommendations to the government of the United Kingdom. Oxford University is not just an ordinary university. And for them to reach this conclusion shows that Amazonia is making huge progress and that our strategy of internationalization has worked extremely very well. Let me also make a short reaction on the publication of the Norwegian Refugee Council and classifying, the conflict between Amazonia and Cameroon from at least a humanitarian perspective as the most neglected conflict in the world. Every year, the Norwegian Refugee Council classifies neglected conflicts. And I think we appeared in the classification of last year, probably position number 9. And we know that Mr. Jan Egeland, who is the Secretary General of the NRC, was one of the first international personality who traveled to our capital, Buea, and looked at the situation and made a report from Buea decrying the neglect of this conflict, the plight of our people. And he also traveled to the United Nations Security Council where he made a deposition about the conflict. This is very important for a couple of reasons. One, it shows the extent of Cameroon's brutality. Because if we quantify the number of Ambazonians who are refugees in Nigeria and refugees in Cameroon, the number of Ambazonians who are internally displaced, while we may look at it from the perspective of suffering, I want you to look at it from the perspective of the actions that led to the displacement of so many people. That is unwarranted brutality, disproportionate application of force by an external aggressor. Be reminded that this mass displacement of Ambazonians is not simply based on threat by Cameroon. It's based on the racing down of hundreds of villages. It's based on orders by colonial deals asking Ambazonians to evacuate their villages and move into a foreign country. One of the things we must know about Mr. Jan Egeland, if he is on your side, you know you have a good cause. And you know you are on the right path. Jan Egeland is somebody who is dedicated to the things he does. And for him to speak and do these kind of publications on our struggle is a milestone achievement of our strategy of exposure, internationalization, and the actions of our bloggers and social media activists. Apart from that, it calls us also to understand what our people are going through. While we may see it and use it for political gains, we must understand that this is about human suffering. Ambazonians are displaced. Ambazonians are IDPs in their own homeland, living in bushes, children being birthed in the woods, women living in squalor. Ambazonians in their hundreds of thousands are refugees in Cameroon, where they are gradually being inculcated with the corrupt mentality of our aggressors. So this calls for concern, and we should use these as a reason to rededicate and recommit to make sure we speed up the day that we bring our displaced compatriots, whether in Nigeria, out here in the West, in Cameroon, and in the bushes, back home to a freed homeland. So these are important issues. I thought I should react to. I also know that Policy Brief has made a scathing report on the threat of mass atrocities, and that is in line with what the Norwegian Refugee Council has published. But that of Policy Brief is critical. It shows the threat of mass atrocities, because what we have observed in the past months, Cameroon committing massacres, targeted killings of utmost brutality against people. And so the Policy Brief paper is quite indicative of the threat that we still face. These are briefs that should immediately get, the United Nations to invoke the principle of the responsibility to protect, to ensure that they can protect our people, or at least the Kofi Annan protection of civilians in times of conflict principle of 1992 should also be injected within the conflict situation to ensure that our people are protected. So my people, our struggle has taken a new dimension in terms of the kinds of discussions that are taking place across different capitals within different international institutions, including research institutions, international human rights institutions. We also know that Human Rights Watch has been doing, constant publications, and we commend their effort for these publications, because they draw the attention of international policymakers and bring pressure to bear on Yaoundé to cease its hostilities and brutality. We know in the past weeks, journalist Mr. Wazizi was murdered in detention. We know Mr. Njoka also has been subjected to utmost brutality while in detention. And Human Rights Watch has been constant in making sure that these cases are highlighted, and the international community understands the gravity of the situation. When messengers are killed because of the message they convey, and it becomes a worrying sign. When journalists are brutalized, when journalists are detained. We remember Mimi Mefo, was also detained at one time and subjected to unfair treatment. And for a female journalist to be put in custody for simply doing publications is something that only autocratic systems like Cameroon still commit. And we thank every international organization and institutions that have kept the plight of our people as top of their agenda, making sure that policymakers are informed and that institutions understand that the gravity of this situation requires urgency in terms of action. And we'll continue to work together with these institutions to provide credible information that should reach the far corners of the world. Now I begin my discussions on the issue of our war of independence with our strategy on self-defense. I want to talk today about negotiations, and it's very critical, so I'm gonna really be meticulous here. And I talk about this topic so that Amazonians are informed. Education is critical. It determines the kind of actions you take, and it determines the kind of positions you hold. As you realized, most Amazonians in the past 5 years believe very strongly they were Cameroonians. And some simply surrendered to the fake narrative, that we have been intoxicated with the overbearing force and intoxication of Cameroon media. But the education that we've provided through social media publications, the information that we have given our people, have made them to become well informed. Generally, Amazonians are now well informed. They know they are not Cameroonians. They know we should not subject ourselves to the green, red, yellow. They know we should not sing their anthem because we are an independent country. And so, but within every conflict, there are serious issues that requires depth of knowledge, more research and understanding in guiding you make the kinds of decisions that will determine whether you lose or you win. And if we are still around today, it's simply because we've been guided by the knowledge that we have acquired in understanding the international system, how to deal with the various issues, how not to be hoodwinked into a process where we will definitely lose our fight. And the reason why Amazonians must understand that our refusal or our insistence that a process of negotiation must not only be transparent, but that it should include more than one international stakeholder. It's because we've had a long experience with the international system on the issue of negotiation. You must be reminded, we were not conquered in war. Cameroon didn't defeat us in war to take over our country. It used the international system to manipulate its way, change its border at independence, dismantled our political institutions, and replaced them by its own. They use our lack of knowledge and stamina in the processes of negotiations. How can you comprehend for one moment that the first democracy in the continent of Africa, the first country that had an alteration of power without any bloodshed, with a tradition that should be protected, became a colony of another country that we provided them political asylum, and provide them with almost 60% of their own GDP. How is that possible? It comes to the issue of leadership. It comes to the issue of leadership. Our forebears are leaders who fought hard, who had the intellect and stamina to walk out of the Eastern House of Nigeria and set up, their own government in Boya, were manipulated for Foncha to be campaigning for federation with Cameroon, and our all-powerful Ndele to be championing the cause for integration into Nigeria. They were weak. They allowed themselves to be manipulated. They believed in an international system that has historically not been fair to us. They went into discussions without preparation. And Yaoundé played a fast one on them, an international system. They divided their attention. While they were using Muna to achieve one objective, they were using Foncha to achieve another objective. While they were using Muna to posit him as an alternative to Foncha, they weakened Foncha's negotiating capabilities. But if these men had stood their grounds, if they had studied the art of negotiations, if they believed that Ambazonia was free and no option except that of full independence was the only option that should be on the table, the international system would have blinked. And so they allowed themselves to be manipulated by Cameroon, by the international system, taking away our sovereignty, taking over our land, dismantling our political institutions, and basically swallowing, one of the greatest civilizations within the continent of Africa. And so, with this experience, with this knowledge about what happened to us, once the international system showed its interest in engaging in discussions to bring together Ambazonia and Cameroon to the table, we provided enough information that should have made the process credible and respectable, and should have made the outcomes acceptable to both parties. Because in a fair game, the outcome is accepted by both parties. In an unfair process, outcomes are contested. And so we made it absolutely clear that you cannot engage in an aspect as complicated as ours by simply gloving over issues. I'll take a couple of examples to show you how these things naturally work. And European states know this very well. Let me take the case of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, the struggle between the British and the Irish Republican Army. Immediately the Swiss came into this process, they were interested in bundling Ambazonian leaders like pupils to Geneva, lecturing them on negotiations and simply hoping that that optic is going to weigh on the Ambazonian resistance in a negative way. In the Irish-British discussion, it took 10 years of underground preparations, underground discussions. 10 years before you could have, an overt peace talks that brought together the United States, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and a credible mediator, a senator from the United States of America. Do not forget, the Irish struggle against the United Kingdom was based on the fact that Northern Ireland was seen through the eyes of the IRA as part of Ireland, while the Unionists within Ireland saw Northern Ireland as an integral part of the United Kingdom. So Ireland had a stake in the conflict. At the time of the negotiation, Bill Clinton was the president. Bill Clinton's great-grands are Irish. He took interest and appointed Senator, I think, Mitchell to oversee the talks. Credible process, long preparation before, a peace talks, and make sure that the issues at stake were discussed in the background. They saw issues where compromise could be made, intractable issues that needed long-term discussions. That is an example of a conflict in the heart of Europe that took long time preparation in the background, secret negotiations between conflicting parties, and impartial adjudicator backed by powerful countries like the United States, Ireland, and others, and respecting the conflicting parties. What happened with Ambazonia and Cameroon? First, we were not even recognized as a conflict party. They were describing us as a geographic region of Cameroon, calling us political parties. They were totally ill-informed about our history, who we are, what we want, and how to define us. Only our outcry made them to be changing position. And so you cannot even engage in the process of bringing together two conflicting parties without recognizing those conflicting parties. In the case of Ireland, the IRA was recognized as a conflict party. Not only recognized, respected. In our own situation, we were not. That one succeeded. Let me give you a classic example of a negotiation that failed because of lack of preparation. That is the struggle between the Sinhalese majority of Sri Lanka and the Tamil minority. The Tamils wanted independence from Sri Lanka, and they accepted their right to self-determination. And they formed their own group, the Tamil Tigers, that was engaged in long war against the Sinhalese-led government of Sri Lanka. And Norway was one of the principal mediators within that conflict. But the lack of long-term background preparation, even though the conflict parties were duly recognized. But unlike in Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom, the Sinhalese-led government of Sri Lanka had no respect for the Tamils. It treated the Tamils in the same way that Cameroon is treating the case of Ambazonia. It saw the Tamils as a renegade province within Sri Lanka that should be captured by force. Unable to defeat the Tamils by force, it reluctantly came to the table. That's the same way Cameroon is treating Ambazonia, with utmost arrogance and contempt, lack of even recognition of our existence, let alone of the problems that has led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. All of these facts are never taken into consideration by the mediators. Another conflict that also failed woefully was the negotiation that failed woefully, or the Palestinian-Israeli negotiation that also held here in Oslo. It took 10 months for the Oslo Peace Conference to be prepared. 10 months. How could you, for an intractable conflict that has been going on for more than 50 years, with so many issues, Palestinian refugees, issues of borders, issues of settlements, issues of the right of Israel to exist, how could you take 10 months to prepare for discussions on such deep issues? And it was like a Photoshop, just a photo op to show that things were moving well. And what is the outcome of the Palestinian-Israeli negotiation? Nothing. Invasion of Gaza, rockets being popped into Israel, escalating conflict beyond the shores of both countries because of a process hurriedly put together for the cameras without any desire to solve the problem. And we saw this from the beginning. And we insisted. We have not rejected negotiation as a possible solution to ending the conflict. Because even if we bundled out the last remnant of Cameroon, we will still have to negotiate a lot of issues. A lot of issues. But we think, based on our experience with Cameroon, based on what we know about different negotiations that have taken place across the globe, those that have succeeded, those that have failed, it is absolutely necessary that we get the process right and that there is fairness in both the process and the substantive part of those negotiations. We have made concrete proposals to many countries that we have discussed with, how we could build a respectable negotiating, mediating team that can be both respected by Cameroon and Amazonia. And I can assure you, my people, that we do not make these decisions lightly. We are not reactionary. In the process of liberation, you subdue your emotions. You subdue your own interest. For example, going to Geneva for a photo op, will take leaders of the AGOVC into hotels free of charge, probably some kickbacks. But what would that give Amazonia? Have we come thus far simply for our own image, for photo ops, to be seen as, walking around with foreign diplomats? The Amazonians who've died, have they died for this? So we are here today because we've made the right decision. The United Nations Security Council met yesterday because of the recommendation from its agency within Africa. These are the same institutions that all came out and said they supported the Swiss process. And they were all there without any reference to the same Swiss process. Even though we totally reject the statement from the US mission, the UK mission, and the German mission as timid, totally timid. If the Norwegian Refugee Council classifies Amazonian conflict as one of the most neglected, we have policy brief warning the world of the threat of mass atrocities. The United Nations Security Council sits, and the statement from members does not reflect the gravity of the situation that we are facing. It's laughable. They talk about negotiations without making reference to the same process they have in the past been asking us to join. And if you read the Russian position, it's a strong position. And it's a position we have called for. Get the UN involved, or at least a UN instrument in terms of a UN resolution. Get the United Nations appoint a special envoy. Get powerful countries to appoint special envoys to make sure that they can oversee, monitor the process and put some pressure on Cameroon. Secondly, we cannot simply fly to Geneva or be talking to the Swiss. We haven't got a war with Switzerland. We aren't claiming any territory of Switzerland. We are not fighting against Switzerland. And how can Cameroon occupy our country, killing our people, and for all this while, Switzerland, with the leverage it has been unable to use that leverage to get Cameroon to come into the process? How is that possible? And how is it possible to force the victims, fly them into Geneva, turn them into boys, to be waiting for the aggressor that invaded their country, to wait for the Nyamfukas that has been raping their women and children? Where is our own respect and dignity? That you find our leaders roped into Switzerland the same way that the Funchas were roped into Fumba. Where is our pride? Where is our pride? That the battle-scarred generals and warriors on the ground, the soldiers, the prisoners of war, have been languishing in jail simply for you to fly into Switzerland, take some photos, without any preconditions, without having the backbone to demand that Cameroon commits to the process, without bringing together your finest men and women who are knowledgeable on the issues at bar? My fellow Amazonians, this is what I would like you to know. We have a long experience with Cameroon. And I want you to always factor this experience into anything that you do. Cameroon is a tricky country. Cameroon is led by a man who also does not blink. So if you're dealing with Cameroon, you must have a basic understanding of the actors that control the levers of power in Cameroon. You must study them, understand them within the context of past conflicts, within the context of past agitations. You must also study the position of Cameroon in Central Africa, its importance to the geopolitical strategic importance of France, and ask yourself, based on this knowledge, is this the kind of country that would easily commit to an internationally supervised negotiation to lose its grip over Amazonia? Because the day Cameroon commits to negotiation, its rule over Amazonia is over. Completely over. We will shatter Cameroon on the table. Cameroon will be the one to tell, hey, move out of Bafoussam. The border is in Congo. They will be the ones to say, Amazonia, please, your border is not in Douala. They know it. We know it. So Cameroon is not hesitant for no reason. They know the day they commit themselves to an internationally supervised fair process, two things have happened. They have said, yes, we have lost control. Yes, this thing is no longer under the domestic jurisdiction of Yaoundé. Number two, it's over. In all conflicts that we have studied, it is the country that has occupied that runs to the negotiating table first. In Sri Lanka, the Tamils had already taken over Sri Lanka. The Sinhalese-led government had no choice. Had no choice. Even in the conflict between the Syrian rebels and Damascus, the rebels had already surrounded the capital. Damascus had no choice. He had to beg, to talk, to buy time to defeat the rebels, and he succeeded. In the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the Palestinians had nothing more to lose. They had lost their land. Hundreds of thousands of them were in refugee camps. Israel had a lot to lose. Its threatened existence. But in the Amazonian situation, with our track record, knowledge on the way Cameroon functions, let me take you with a few examples. And I will begin with the latest ones. Do not forget that the teachers and the lawyers, the consortium, went into discussions with Yaoundé. It was not even asking Yaoundé to leave Amazonia. It laid no claim over the territorial space of Amazonia. It was talking about adjusting the laws of Cameroon to fit in. Cameroon was unwilling to negotiate the alteration of, the curriculum of our education, the language that are used in our courts. Cameroon was unwilling. What did it do? It kidnapped the same people it was discussing with. It took Fontem into jail, took Agbobala into jail. Deacon Tassan was running for his life. All the other consortium leaders were running. The Mbakuros escaped. These are men and women who had no threat to Yaoundé. Cameroon could not negotiate simple issues. Is this the country you want to bring at this stage to the negotiating table to negotiate the surrender of 60% of the GDP? Is this the country? Let's take the very unthreatening issues of political liberalization and democracy. SDF could not have mayors in councils it won. Paul Biya could not tolerate mayors who lay no claim to territory, were of no threat to Yaoundé's financial grip. They appointed overseers called government delegates. Paul Biya was the only leader post-1989 that failed to organize sovereign national conference, or at least even a conference. Paul Biya said, you will fight until you get tired. And because then we had politicians who were simply, they thought they were already in leadership. They thought, you know, they had popularity, power, and stuff. They could not contemplate living the luxury of their homes with bodyguards and every other person, cooks and servants, to stay in the jungle to defend the victory that they really won. Remember 1996, I guess, when Jalakwan was installed in Victoria. I told Dr. Cho and Louis Shallow, let's take this gangster out and install Comrade Jarvis, who was the elected mayor. In Boya, the mayor was Endele, a close friend. But who was the actual mayor? The deal was the one who determined financial expenditures within that municipality. Is this the kind of state that you think at this level of our conflict you could simply just push to the table to negotiate its exit from our land? Anyone that Biya has failed to bribe to integrate within its own political system, they have murdered. Even when they succumbed to the creation of the Boya University, that came about because we bled on the street. They gave it with one hand, took it back with the other hand by appointing all CPDM-led administrators to determine the curriculum of education and the direction of the university. This is the track record of the man in charge of Cameroon. For so many years, Cameroon changed the perception that we had of ourselves. We accepted being called les Anglophones. We accepted being called le Biafran. You thought it was simply an accident of connotation? No. It was a gradual process to make you a slave and for you to accept that status of servitude to the extent where you can never hold claim to what rightly belonged to you. And for those who propagated those notions of servitude, it gave them power of dominion over you. Masters don't negotiate with servants. Have you ever contemplated that the master simply gets up one day because neighbors are shouting about the number of slaves who have died to sit and negotiate that you people become equals? After 400 years of slavery, blacks in the United States are still struggling to breathe. They are still unaccepted. Slaves, masters don't relinquish their dominion over you, because domination is not simply control. It has benefits, financial benefit. It comes with power that translates into so many things. They determine how you move, the values that are inculcated within your own system. This is the kind of country we are dealing with. How do you reverse that trend to get the master on the table? It's only when the master knows that the time of dominion is over. They don't go down. They try to negotiate their exit to live with pride and dignity. Slave takers don't simply give away the power that they have over you. Cameroon has not been threatened far enough by the West. They have seen our force. They aren't here talking about negotiation because they think the Norwegian Refugee Council has produced a report that says 780 Amazonian children haven't gone to school. They aren't calling you for negotiation because they think, Mami Api was murdered, 400 villages or more burned down. They aren't asking you to negotiate because they think, oh man, they really pity Amazonians, they have sympathy for you and they worry about our prisoners. They saw Cameroon was losing. They were afraid that if Cameroon loses, Cameroon will collapse and engineer political instability that has the impact of spreading beyond the borders of Cameroon. They saw that you were winning. They injected speed brakes, deceived naive and gullible leaders to lower the pressure on Cameroon. They realized that your force, your strategy on the ground had undermined political legitimacy and the exploitation and extortion by Cameroon. They weren't calling for you in Geneva to talk about how to get to Boya. They were finding a way to keep you under Yaoundé. You fell for it. You thought it was the end of the conflict. So let's just go so that, this thing comes to an end. Freedom and cheap, Amazonians. It's not a walk in the park. It's not eating chocolate. To be free, to be independent. It's not something that after 3 years you think, Yaoundé with all what it has to lose, the international system with all the uncertainties, will just negotiate Amazonian independence and say, hey, take over Boya and begin to govern. You have to know that this is a struggle. This is a struggle that will alter the geopolitical reality of our sub-region. This is a struggle that will rewrite the history of the world. It will indict countries that betrayed us. It will hold thousands of murderers within Cameroon accountable. Looted resources banked in foreign countries will be repatriated. There are huge consequences for our independence. And so don't take it lightly. Even if tomorrow Paul Biya says, well, I'm about to surrender, that is the time to arm yourself more. Because once you even gain your independence, you will begin to govern. You will be held accountable by the people. You will not be judged by how much you fought for Amazonian freedom. You will be judged by how many children you turned from poverty into opportunities. You will be judged by those you live from poverty. You will be judged by how many children you provide education to. You will be judged by the amount of people you provide them opportunities and good jobs. And any destabilization from a neighboring country, you will not have the excuse that we were invaded by Cameroon. So the day Cameroon says it's time to surrender is the day you arm to defend your borders, so that the government you put in Boya will have an independent space within which to articulate its policies and make them take root for the interests of Amazonians. Because it will be payback time for Cameroon. It will be payback time for those who have lost. They will try to engineer political instability, economic decay, economic collapse, so that the people will hold the governments accountable and kick them out. I don't want to tell you about many examples within the continent. So Amazonians, our history call on us, our experiences with Cameroon and the international system call on us to be brave, to be focused, to reject any bait thrown around that we cannot understand. There must be clarity in intentions. There must be understanding of people's articulations. Our interests must be emboldened and represented in any package that are being sold to us. We aren't cheap. We've been made cheap for so long that we saw ourselves in the image of our oppressors. We begged them for jobs, begged them for opportunities, cried to be Cameroonians, celebrated their victories in football matches while our children could not play in Mutengene. Why playing in the Bamenda Municipal Stadium is like jostling with balls and big pebbles. We're talking about the richest country within the continent of Africa in terms of natural and human resources. I'd like you to know that one last point I want to make about this is still on the country called Cameroon. As they say, le Cameroun, c'est le Cameroun. We see all what is going on today. Presidential daughters being locked up in vacated palaces, legally dead president or naturally dead presidents. Why Ambazonia has commanders-in-chief who are overseeing the war. Cameroon has no more commander-in-chief. Biya is legally dead. I don't think he's naturally dead, but Biya is legally dead. He is not in charge. If you cannot rescue your own daughter, you can't talk about distant kids. So we are dealing with a country that has no leader. We are dealing with a country that believes in manipulation and the deployment of force, because all its victories has been gained through force. This is a country that it was asked to go for negotiation. It created a national dialogue. Take note, this is the same country in the early 90s when they asked Cameroon simply to revise its constitution in a way that, recreates the federal system. Cameroon changed a grand débat into a large débat by faxes and phones, unable to sit on the table with people who are simply asking to reform the state and remain your colonial slaves. Why the Carson Anyangwes drafted constitutional proposals for discussions. Yaoundé was not prepared. The day Cameroon will be prepared, you will know it. I've said to you before, we became an international contender. That's why our issues are being discussed. Not to the level that we think should be discussed, but at least we've gotten big countries talking. Ordinarily us, we've gotten them talking. The day Cameroon loses absolute control in terms of exploitation of our resources, the day there would be an ensuing instability in Cameroon, Cameroon will ask to come to the table. You will start hearing the world talking about, in any case, we think the people of Ambazonia have a right to self-determination. Language matters. Language sometimes determines positions. We are listening carefully. We are reading keenly how they talk about us, how they describe us. Do they respect us? They don't respect us. Do they care about us? They don't care about us. They care more about restoring status quo ante, ensuring Cameroon has absolute control. But they are caught in an inescapable network. The fact that there is no leader in Cameroon, the fact that the ensuing instability has consequences on other countries. The international system is struggling at this moment to use Ambazonia as a stabilizing factor within Cameroon. When they will handpick the next leader, having made some baby steps on the Ambazonian issue, they believe the Cameroonian people will tolerate that leader because progress has been made on the Ambazonian issue. We are watching what is going. We are having discussions with the world. I want to assure you, we are putting our position, and the position we are articulating is firm. We need to see the signs. Process determines outcome, so the process must be clear. We aren't gonna blink as far as our right to be free from Cameroon's rule is concerned. Because we aren't here because of their support. We aren't here because of their help. While we understand the international system, the difficulties of diplomacy, the respect of sovereignty, we understand also there are basic international principles that suppresses the issue of sovereignty, especially when genocide is being committed. There are principles that must be invoked that takes away the cloak of sovereignty over a country when those countries are incapable of protecting people. And so while we appreciate some of the baby steps that the world has taken, we think they must go far enough to stop the brutality on our people, to stop the killings, and to stop the degeneration of our economy. We need our children to go back to school. My fellow Ambazonians, you probably must have been asking what has compelled us. I know most of you think we've fought hard enough. Yes, we have. You think we've sacrificed a lot. Yes, we have sacrificed. Is it enough to get us our country? It's not enough to get us our country. You must understand that for more than 100 years, we have been sacrificing. We have been battling against Cameroon. And I come back to the issue of revising our own history. Why some may think, this struggle started in 2016. Totally suppressing the sacrifices of brave men and women who fought and died before. You must be reminded that we didn't start fighting in 2016. We've been fighting for a very long time. Some of the leaders you listen to today, you take somebody like Kavi. That is a man who's been fighting for close to 20 years or more. Started fighting when he was basically young. I remember in 2004 when I sneaked myself into the territory and I met Kavi. I think it was an action at Mr. John Frundi's home. You find people like Numvi Walters, who have been locked up in the Bamenda Central Prison since 2014 or 2015. You talk about the others who are there with him. You talk about those who are still in prison since 1997. You talk about the former Secretary General of SCNC assassinated at his home. We talk about 2001 in Kumbo, when our kids were mauled by La République du Cameroon. We talk about 1992 also in Du, where the former Dio, caused the rape of women and children. Asked men to crawl on sharp sand and made our women to undress themselves. The sacrifices has gone for a long time. In 1997, when we had 300 Ambazonians arrested and deported to Yaoundé. Ntanen Daniel died when, gendarmes put a stick in his urinary tract, causing him to bleed to death. Julius Ngundi was tortured, and he was dying and begging and crying just to be taken to hospital. We have legends before us who fought hard for our freedom. Chief Ayaba, the man who said he was going to wear his beard until Amazonia was free. The one selfless leader, even with his age, could travel across the globe to bat for us. You have Dr. Mfo, the guy who changes prison all the time for Amazonia. It's never blinked. Who was whisked off from Nigeria, betrayed by Nigeria, transported and detained in Communicado for more than a year, and is now sitting in jail. We have a lot of Amazonians who have died, who have sacrificed their lives, sometimes just begging for equality within the context of a one Cameroon. In 1990, Juliet Sikor and others died under the banner of the SDF, knowing the SDF constitutional proposal was still for one Cameroon. We had, in 1996, young boys killed in Victoria, in Newtown Market, simply asking for their vote to be allowed to count. The tragedies we have gone through with Cameroon are tragedies that we cannot simply recount. We didn't get up one day and pick up arms. We didn't get up one day and say, well, it's good to go into the jungles and defend the independence of Amazonia. Late Albert Mukom, locked up at a Kondengi maximum security prison. He died because of the pressures of detention. Though released, but look at great figures, archives of our history, whose lives were cut short because of the arrogance of an invader who was not even willing to reform the system to give us space within that system. We didn't get up one day and say, it's better to shoot ourselves to Boya. We have, from 1993, with Boya Declaration, All Anglophone Conference in Boya, with thousands of our people came together to catalog the injustices that have been meted against us by Cameroon. Political injustices of exclusion, economic injustices of deprivation, social injustices of deprivation. We catalog these things and presented not only to Yaoundé but to the world to express our anguish at the way that we have been treated, to show the world that we are a people who believe in due process, that we were willing to come together to discuss our plight and to be able to reach out, send a hand to Yaoundé to see if we have willing partners to talk about the solution. Our overtures were rebuffed. We met again in 1994 in Bamenda, a conference that was highly disrupted. We couldn't even have the right to meet, to talk about our plight, to talk about our future. Cameroon thought we were such a captured people that it could determine whether we breed, whether we assemble, whether we had the right to the freedom of speech, fair trial, due process. It knew we were a conquered people, that we could not even assemble. We had running battles on the street of Bamenda to get leaders to meet, to come on with the Bamenda Proclamation. You should know, we have a long experience with Yaoundé. We didn't just get up, pick up guns, and start fighting. We gave our blood to even have a university. A simple institution of knowledge was denied us. That shows you the arrogance of the people we are dealing with. That shows you the contempt with which they hold us. That we could not have a university. As I have said, I became one of the first students to have direct admission because I had vowed I would never study in Yaoundé. Admitted to study mathematics and computer sciences. We know computers. Moved to chemistry, chemical processes and chemistry. No lab. They said to us, because you disrupted our street, we will give you a glorious high school called a university. We will starve you of knowledge so you remain subjected to our own narratives and remain slaves for eternity. We fought hard. We started begging for money to get dormitories, to get study halls constructed, to get libraries constructed. We were kicked out of that same university, a place we fought to get. CPDM cohorts appointed to oversee, to take it again under the dominion of Cameroon. Students were shot, Mfolem Gilbert, at point blank range, murdered, just demanding his right, opportunities within the country of his birth, a place that produces 60% of the GDP. I tell you all of this so you understand the Nyamfukas we are dealing with across the Momo, the beast that occupied our country more than 57 years ago. Understanding them will tell you what it will take to end the tyranny of their rule over our country. My people, we have a long history with Cameroon. They've humiliated every leader. John Frundi won an election in 1992. The man who lost the election put him under house arrest for months. His crime, winning an election that Cameroon itself organized within Amazonia. People lost their arms. We still have Amazonians today, we have forgotten about them, who fought street battles to protect the concept of democracy, for the right to liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the right to determine the kind of political system that governs you, to have the consent given to your own governors. Mr. Biya and Cameroon lobbed grenades from helicopters, chopping the limbs and arms of our citizens. Do we still remember them? Their sacrifices were the building blocks of the venom now in us to end Cameroon's rule once and for all. So we didn't start in 2016. The battle for our freedom has been waged for decades. Thousands of our people have laid their lives. Never forget. Never revise history in the same way that Cameroon revise our history. Be focused on liberation. In that way, you will remember the contributions of each and every one. So when we got up a few years ago and said, it is time to defend our dignity, it was based on an assessment of our experiences with Cameroon. September 22nd, 2017, saw millions of our people on the street. A replication of 1995, when the delegation came back from the United Nations. Thousands of people marched from Mutengene through by 17 up to Boya. Ambazonians yearn to be free. It is manifested in the way they act, the sacrifices they make. Anyone who tells you Ambazonians will settle for anything less than full independence is joking. I tell you a story of a friend who attended a coalition meeting the other day. And she came out from the meeting really depressed and wrote to me and said it was bleak. They were talking about the impossibilities of independence. They were talking about probably countries not recognizing us. They were talking only about the possibility of federation. She is on ground zero. She was depressed. That is somebody who respect ghost towns every Monday, going through the sweltering heat of oppression of Cameroon. But just the idea that we could still be part of Cameroon got her into depression. The most depressing information you can pass to an Ambazonian is to contemplate that we can coexist with Cameroon. 22nd of September 2017, millions of Ambazonians on the street. Olive branches showing to the world the political legitimacy for independence. Millions, old mothers, old fathers, children, nursing moms, everybody went to the street to register their voice, their claim for the right of our people to be free, for us to have the right to determine the kind of political system that we want to have. That emboldened Siseko Ayub Tabi and his team to declare and restore our independence on the 1st of October 2017. Millions again. What was the response of Yaoundé, of the arrogant brute nation that wants to lay claim over our territory without our consent? They murdered young boys in Boya. They chased them like game in the bushes and mauled them. They shot so many. They killed because they knew the international system was going to stay quiet, as they have done for 57 years. They knew then as they know today that in the contest between stability and our freedom, the international system will go for stability, not knowing they are facing a new generation. Defenseless Ambazonians yearning on the street for their freedom were murdered. Their bodies left in the open for vultures to devour, their families never having the opportunity to lay them to rest, to have the final place to remember their lost ones. They brought us so much hurt, so much pain, and as if that was not enough, there was no empathy, no compassion, only arrogance, claim to our territory, claim of their right to govern us. Their people stayed mute. The world stayed silent. We begged the world to come to our rescue. We asked the world to listen to our entreaties, our pleas. There was deafening silence because they knew status quo would be restored, because they knew it had happened before, They knew we rose before we were all suppressed. Biya got away with all the crimes he committed. They knew it was just a matter of time because we were termed political agitators without any agenda for our own freedom. They forgot that they were dealing with a never again generation. Defenseless, we rose up in the defense of our humanity, in the defense of our dignity, in the defense of the lives of our people, in the defense of the independence restored. If there is anything that makes you a man, that makes you a woman to be remembered, is to rise up at a time when duty calls to defend your independence, the right to be free, the political space within which all theories, practices can take root. We took that challenge within guns. We developed a master strategy based on our understanding of the forces allied against us, based on the understanding that we lack the resources, the knowledge that our commanders are not trained. Unlike all revolutions, commanders become officers through training. The Mandelas went to get training. All the Fidel Castros, the Che Guevaras, the Mugabes, the Sam Njomas, they all got training. They had neighboring countries that supported them. All of us stood with them at their time of greatest need. We understood the hypocrisy of the world. We knew they would let us down as they've done before. So our strategy was not only based on a strategy of liberation, but a strategy of survival. Because in the process of liberation, if you can't survive, you've laid waste to the land. And the next generation will be citizens of the country that have occupied you. So we put in place a strategy that to a certain extent helped the Amazonians to survive, to defend the independence restored, to bring pride to our people, to our nation, and respect from the world. We knew that if we undermine political legitimacy, Cameroon will have no claim over Amazonia. The only claim Cameroon has over Amazonia is through its governors. I'm not talking about governors. I'm talking about all those appointed, selected by Cameroon to oversee the process of governance within Amazonia. Mayors, senators, DOs, governors. The only claim Cameroon has over Amazonia is through these political administrators that give them a semblance of political control and political legitimacy. We knew our strategy must be designed to undermine this claim. And we did. We took them out. We challenged their right to govern without consent. We took them out from their bunkers, humiliated them, for the first time restored pride and honor to Amazonia. DOs held sway over our lives. They determined whether we own lands or not. They created tribal wars between villages so that they can renegotiate borders of villages and claim land. DOs were commanders of the regime that had so much power that we feared them. We turned them into wasted boys who were now in armored cars and dressed with bulletproof vests. We won Amazonians. The strategy was tested and proven. We also knew that taking away political legitimacy by undermining governance through making Amazonia ungovernable was critical. You cannot be in a liberation struggle and you allow business as usual. You allow the regime to collect taxes from traders, from business people. Making the territory ungovernable reminds the people that there is an ongoing war for our freedom and our survival. reminds the world that there is a crisis that must be dealt with. Ungovernability as a strategy became a tool that we use to control Amazonia. We determined when there was lockdown. We determined when we opened the country. We determined when there was chaos. And we determined when there was tranquility. The strategy of making Amazonia ungovernable elevated Amazonia to a point of political recognition and a player within the domestic sphere. We also knew the survival of Cameroon depended on the exploitation of our resources. Economic sabotage as a strategy was a critical instrument to stop the exploitation and stuffing the treasury of Cameroon. We knew if we undermine Cameroon's ability to exploit our resources, it's just a matter of time before they will lack money to pay their soldiers. We also knew by stopping the exploitation of resources, do not forget, Cameroon's credit worthiness is based on showcasing the amount of capital it can get from marketing resources from our country. And so Cameroon could easily borrow money from the international community by simply showcasing the fact that it can market cocoa, timber, and oil. Once we take away that possibility, Cameroon does not only lose resources, it loses its credit worthiness and its power of borrowing, further exacerbating tension within its own political space. These strategies were interdependent, interrelated. None worked in isolation. And so when we decided that it was time to protect our territorial integrity and to defend the independence restored and the lives of our people, we needed a strategy that worked within our own context. And we put one. We didn't just ask boys to go pick up guns. We created training centers. I visited with them once. We educated them. I remember always addressing fighters in camps, explaining to them why they fight, letting them know you aren't fighting for Ayaba, letting them know you're fighting for your country, you're fighting for yourselves, for your children, to bring pride back, to give yourself an opportunity. We gave them the political education that is the principal weapon that will help sustain the armed resistance. That was the first guns we gave them. Knowledge, the power to comprehend, to understand why we fight. Then we gave them the strategy that could win. Take note, we were facing the bees. In determining the strategy on taking down their forces, we realized we had to deal with the police, with the gendarmes, and the army. Who were the strongest? The bees. They were invincible. They were frightening. They were trained by the Americans. We went first for them. It was psychological. If you sit in your house and your father is Mike Tyson and an armed robber breaks in and takes your father down, you can't fight anymore. Even if you were Evander Holyfield. When the strongest man in the room is taken down, the others succumb. We knew if we shattered the invincibility that surrounded the bees, we were going to make them vulnerable to mistakes. We were going to frighten the gendarmes, the army, and the police. And it worked. I remember one night overseeing the attack of the bee station in Bengui. I was on as the soldiers left their base in mile 8. We had set up intelligence units around Alamando, monitoring movement of troops from the airport for any reinforcement that could go through Ntinkak. I was on until Ivo and the others arrived in Bengui, until the operation was over. The strategy worked. We shattered their invincibility. We made it impossible for them to have checkpoints within our cities. We took them out. We gave courage to our people, what they needed to complete their cycle of training, knowledge, courage, and materials. We took their materials. We gave courage to Amazonian boys and girls across the territory. Every day a new unit was erected across the territory. The courage of the Ivos taking down bees, and the courage I showed to accept it over international media and to defend it based on international law, inspired Amazonians, showed them we could challenge these people, showed them we aren't afraid anymore. We took away fear. We took away their invincibility. It gave every young boy the opportunity to vent the anger that has been in them for so many years on these targets. It created the movement for the liberation of Amazonia across the 13 states. The first revolution in the history of mankind that is being fought across the entire territory. Every block was fighting. Every block was being defended. That is where our strength came from. That is the power we showed that made them to call us to Switzerland. It was not love for Amazonia. It was not love for our independence. It was not love for our people. It was not compassion, empathy for the plight of our people. It was our bravery. And their desire was to undermine that bravery, to divide us in the full glare of the international system, to make the leaders look like they were competing, like they were divided. Amazonia is not divided. Amazonia believes in independence. Amazonians do not believe in the Swiss process as currently structured. Amazonians believe in the strategy of self-defense to undermine political legitimacy, stop the exploitation of our resources, and transfer pride back to the Amazonian people. We aren't divided. In every revolution, the enemy injects semblance of division to confuse you. If you look beyond the veil, you will discover we are going to the same direction. We might not be employing the same strategies. We might not be adopting the same methodology, but we are on the move as a people. That is what we must take pride in. There will be differences, but if you focus on the strength, on what brings us together, on the strategy that we have put in place to totally undermine Cameroon in our country, it's gonna work. My dear people, I want to tell you where we are and what we need to do to move this revolution forward. Where we are in terms of international negotiation. The world is talking now. They have not arrived at a conclusion on how any internationally supervised negotiation is going to take place. But at least we've been hearing whispering campaigns about getting more countries involved in the process. We read the recommendation of the UN agency in Africa asking the United States and Germany to be part of such a process. There is a stronger language being used now, at the level of the international system on how this thing should move forward. We are talking to different countries. We are talking to different institutions. As I said before, our position is unchanged, unwavering. Amazonia is our land. It is time that Cameroon bundles itself out. Otherwise, we are going to bundle them out. So as far as international negotiation is concerned, there is movement towards a multilateral process where more than one country is involved. That will get Cameroon to commit, that we will begin somehow with the soft issues. You must know that to begin negotiations with the intractable issues, the core issues, are difficult. They are very simple issues that we could begin to talk about our curriculum of education, reopening our schools under an Amazonian curriculum of education. Those are simple issues that you can deal with. Our internally displaced persons, access to international humanitarian organization, those are issues that we can talk about. And you should know that, international humanitarian organizations are in constant consultation with us to make sure that they can have security to provide support for our people. And we call on them to make sure they have permission before they operate in Ambazonia. Permission must be gotten from Boya, not Yaoundé. We are the masters of the land. We hold sway over who gets in and who is going to be protected. And let me sound this. Any international organization that goes in without prior knowledge of our forces and the political leadership will be pulled aside for questioning until clarity is given. So these are simple issues that you could begin negotiations talking about. Refugees, the plight of prisoners of war, their conditions of detention, the illegality of certain action, the brutality. As I said last time, the world can also bring pressure to bear on Cameroon by, referring Cameroon to the International Criminal Court. We know Cameroon is not a signatory of the Rome Statutes of the ICC, but as I said last time, there are different ways of bringing Cameroon to answer for the crimes that it has committed within Ambazonia. That is what we call a pressure point that the world could bring to bear on Cameroon to commit and begin serious discussion. For example, as I said last time, the prosecutor can simply invoke, the premise of Article 15, to refer Cameroon and to cause an investigation by his office. And we've provided enough evidence to show that there are ongoing crimes. The warning by policy brief, fear of mass atrocities, is enough to get the prosecutor to invoke Article 15 of the Statutes of Rome to begin investigation. You could also have referral from the UN Security Council. We are not trying to, there is precedence to it. There are many countries that are not, subject to the Rome Statutes who have been referred by the by the UN Security Council. And so they should refer Cameroon not only for accountability, but also as a pressure point on issues of negotiation. Secondly, we think on the issue of international negotiation, the world must be more robust. How did Sudan get to talking with South Sudan? It was not simply because it was bound to lose. It was because George Bush, as my IREP has always said, was looking for blood after September 11. He was looking for blood, and Sudan had been seen as a sponsor of terrorism. And so George Bush used that pressure by naming Sudan as an international sponsor of terrorism with devastating consequences on international trade and international political representation. And Bush was planning to do whatever. And Sudan was forced to blink to get into discussions on the issue of South Sudan. So the international system should be more robust, more united in its commitment to the process for purposes of accountability and to get Cameroon to commit to the process. We Ambazonians, the other day I had meetings with Comrade Yerima and Comrade Jomba Akuro. We will be coming out. I don't want to talk more about that, but we will be coming out soon to make some announcements. As you must know, our collaboration with Mr. Seseko Ayutabe has yielded some dividend. As I said before, collaborations on issue by issue basis is critical for the world to know that we are on the same page. And I want to thank the AGOVCs and the IG Care for working on the issue of SCBC. I want to thank the board of SCBC for making it possible for our people of the AGOVC to constantly be on air. Thanks to you, this wouldn't have happened. And I think that we should all work together on such issues. There are always differences which we'll confront, but leadership is called at such times to develop the instruments to navigate those differences and not to reinforce them. So on the issue of international negotiations, we will be coming out in the next few days to make some far-reaching statements. We've worked a lot in the background. We've done a lot of things, and I want all of us, the leaders, myself, Comrade John and Comrade Yerima, will be coming out to make some pronouncements. So the world must know we are united in terms of how this process should go, in terms of how we should negotiate. And let me use this unique opportunity also to talk about, something that I know we will talk about when we come out, all of us. When I spoke as leader of AGOVC on how our team will be constituted, I talked about our social media bloggers, our activists, who have done an incredible job to keep our struggle alive, to be part of the process of negotiation as a bloc. I talked about, the political leaders, of the leaders of the different movements, in this case, myself, Comrade Yerima, Comrade Akuro, forming their own bloc. I also talk about the greatest people who are sacrificing, our forces on the ground. For post-independent stability, we must make sure we get all of the stakeholders as part of the process of determining the outcome of our struggle. Not only in fighting, but when it comes to negotiation, that their voices are also represented. There was one notable group that I left out: our prisoners of war. Our prisoners of war will and must be represented in the issues of negotiation. They will have their bloc and their representation to determine the outcome of our resistance. And if we bring all of these people together and agree on a negotiating position, that will be the premise of the articulation of our expert negotiators. We've got it right. Post-independent stability will be assured because the outcome must have been determined by all of us. And I call on all of these groups to show that level of flexibility that can get us together. Why I'm saying this is to tell the world Cameroon should not take an excuse that they don't know who to talk to. They know who to talk to. We are ready, we are prepared. When they commit, when the world put in place a credible, impartial system that we are convinced will look critically at the issues that are bound, our expert negotiators will be there. They will brief the leaders, the bloggers, the defense leaders, and they will brief the prisoners of war. We will all agree on how much the butchers Cameroon owes us. We'll agree on issues of accountability, the pain, the compensation that they need to pay to our prisoners, the people they've deprived of liberty, those they have murdered, how much they have stolen from our country. These preparations are critical because negotiations are complex. All of us are not aware of the issues at bar. And so if you just go in there to talk and you are not aware of the issues that you need to talk about, you would be hoodwinked in the same way that the frontiers were manipulated and deceived. So that's where we are in terms of international negotiation. There is a gradual shift towards a multilateral process. And we, the leaders, are more united in ensuring that the process is built in such a way that it's going to reflect a genuine outcome for Ambazonians. On the issue of education, we are inching closer to September. And we still hold the ban on colonial education in our country. Ambazonia has dynamic control of a lot of territories. And we have been talking with UNESCO, we have been talking with UN agencies on how to help us to use our own curriculum of education to educate our children. Recently, we set up our Department of Education, appointed a Secretary for Education, and we know that there is the existence of the Ambazonian Education Board that has built one of the best curriculum of education that takes into consideration our economic and socio-economic and political context. And that curriculum of education was built out of a study of about 10 different systems of education of 10 renowned countries whose economic prosperity is rooted in the kind of education that they've had. So we are confident that we have developed a curriculum of education that meets the aspirations of our people, stand the test of time of the 21st century. It's going to help us build a 21st century economy that takes into consideration our local realities to strengthen those realities to give us a shot in competing at the global level. So we are moving towards September, and we will be increasing the budget for our Department of Education to make sure that we can reopen community schools that have been shut down by Cameroon, and call on the international system to work with us and to make sure that children are able to go to school under an educational system which they want. We will not accept an erstwhile colonial educational system that has turned us into economic and political liabilities to ourselves, our country, and to the world. So as we move towards September, we're working extremely very hard to make sure across the territory we open these schools and make sure our children have the kind of education. We're also building a system where the possibility of online education, as we have seen from the coronavirus pandemic, online education is a reality. Static education is being phased out. People can study from homes. I know people will question how possible that would be based on the fact that we don't have the kind of strong internet. But there are systems. There are systems built in laptops, in tablets that can contain a lot of educational materials that our children can use. And so these are some of the issues that we are discussing with our partners, make sure that they can help us provide these and facilitate these different strategies that we are putting in place for education. I know the decision to stop schools has been a very difficult one, but I have always maintained that the right to go to school is different from the right to education. What we have always had is the right to go to school. We've not had the right to education. I know it suffices to some to simply say I went to school, even if I'm now a political and economic liability to myself. Even if I die on my way through the Mediterranean just to find greener pastures out here in Europe. Even if I have to, earn 35,000 amber or 50,000 amber and never give my own children that opportunity. I know to some it suffices, but this is not the way you build a country. This is not the way you aspire to become the best. You can't just settle for the kind of educational system put in place by Cameroon. If we could simply settle, lawyers would have settled for the legal system. The teachers wouldn't have gone on strike to alter that curriculum of education. We wouldn't have fought for a university. We wouldn't have fought for that university to be equipped to meet the standards of any university. Gilbert Folem wouldn't have given up his life as a master's student just to alter things. We as Ambazonians don't settle for less. We may sacrifice one generation to ensure the next has the opportunity to flourish, to become better educated, to have the opportunities to be stronger. So we are working on that. In terms of a tragedy that sometimes happens on ground zero, kidnappings, extortion, let me explain a couple of things. And do not get me wrong. It's not me condoning any acts. We must understand that the thousands of fighters we have on ground zero, nobody is paid. Nobody is given a medical support. Time and again, here and there, soldiers are wounded. Imagine a barrack with 300 people. How do they feed themselves? How do they survive? We don't have any country that provides us with the materials we need to defend our freedom, our lives, and our independence. How do they supply themselves? Yesterday we were attacked in 4 places. Others had to move because of lack of bullets. So we must understand these young men and women leave their homes at their prime ages, take up arms to defend our villages, our cities, They sacrifice everything they have. Their children, their spouses, their families, their jobs, their security, their lives. So when we talk about independence, it's not sitting in your home that gives you independence. It's not shouting at the top of your voices. It's the real work, the kind of sacrifices that our soldiers are making on ground zero. And so we can understand some excesses when sometimes they arrest people, or sometimes they steal food, or sometimes some go ask for ransom. We can understand it, though we don't tolerate it. But soldiers must also understand the protection of our civilian population is the primary reason for which you took up arms in the first place. You cannot be seen undermining the very people that you took up arms to protect their lives, their dignity, and their independence. It's counterproductive. And our civilian population has always offered support. Ground Zero civilian population have provided funding. Villages have given food. Communities have sacrificed and provided materials for the defense of our independence. So you must understand, your job is not abstract independence. Your job is to protect the lives of our people within a political space within which they can be free. But the primary job is the people. They prayed, remember, when General Ivo said, the things you are doing against our civilian population makes them not to pray for us again. You don't understand the power of their prayers. Their prayers fill us with joy and hope. It makes us feel even if we die, there is life beyond that. It makes us feel like even if we die, we are dying for a just cause. We've died for a just cause. That the best wishes they gave to us. Mothers who cried when children or soldiers are killed. So our soldiers must see the protection of our civilian population as their primary duty. That is why we have developed the Code of Justice. The Code of Justice are a series of norms and rules that gives an understanding to the soldiers of the crimes and the remedies, the processes of getting justice. So if you arrest someone whom you term a blackleg, do you just exact jungle justice? How do you subject that person to a process that gives that person the possibility of exonerating themselves? What if you picked up the wrong guy? So the Code of Justice will put in place that kind of system where an accused have the possibility to explain and defend themselves. And where jungle justice will give way to kind of justice that comes through due process. Where you can simply name the crime of collaboration as a crime against the Amazonian people. The crime of enabling. So if you arrest an enabler, a collaborator, historically and as the Code of Justice stipulates, crimes of collaboration meet with the punishment of death. I know it sounds harsh, but collaborators account for the death of 10% of our people. They provide intelligence. They give Cameroon a semblance of political legitimacy. They give a false narrative to the international system that not all Amazonians want independence. They actively provide support for the killing, rape, maiming of our people. In France, they were all taken out. In the United States, collaborators were taken out. They were named and shamed. Even those who simply subscribed to the ideology of communism were named and shamed. Amazonia would not be different. But we want it to be through due process. The Code of Justice provides that opportunity. Secondly, we understand we are in the liberation phase. We must also recognize that our soldiers have liberated territories. Though we don't have static control, we have dynamic control. There is interaction between the activities of soldiers and the activities of the communities. So the necessity to put in place kinds of systems that oversees activities of those communities is critical. That is why in the days ahead, we will be talking mostly about the kinds of systems, local systems that we put in place that will deal with the issues of health, community education, the issues of community policing, the issues of farming and businesses within those communities. We are working on a program that will make sure that we reduce the tension between soldiers and the communities. But the code of justice is gonna be the bridge between the soldiers and the communities. It's gonna mitigate the actions of soldiers that gives community the impression that the soldiers are not working for them. These systems we put in place has two objectives. One, to bring our people together within those liberated communities. Number two, to show the international community that we can institute a system of rule within our own territory that can ensure political stability and gives them the confidence that, if recognized, will be a place of peace, tranquility, and political and economic development. So we're working on all of these things. But the biggest thing we have worked on, which is central to why you fight. I know you fight for independence. That is political abstract. It's political abstract. When they ask you why, what do you fight for? Independence. You fight for the right to proper education. That's what you fight for. You fight for the right to the freedom of speech, the right to determine who governs you, the right to vote, the right to good housing, the right to access to health. But these things can only happen within a political space within which we structure it in such a way that works for the interest of the Amazonian people. We have worked on the Amazonian Independence Manifesto. It's a blueprint of the kind of Amazonians that you fight and die for every day. I give you an example. You should know why you struggle. You should know why you bleed. You should know why you sacrifice. It will give you one more reason to persevere. The Victoria Deep Sea Port, we have estimated it is going to be able to create direct and indirect employment within Victoria and its neighborhood of more than 150,000 people. The Victoria Deep Sea Port alone, directly and indirectly, will give an opportunity for more than 150,000 people to be employed. We have also made sure the diasporans will be able to ship goods within our ports and pay no custom duty, because we don't want to make taxing of such goods as the primary source of the revenue of the state. We know if these diasporans are able to ship free of charge, they are going to bring these goods within our territory, create more opportunities of wealth, create more employment. Through employment, the state will be able to have income taxes. The more Amazonians are in job, the more revenue the government gets. We are also in our Amazonian Independence Manifesto. The diasporan population will contribute immensely. Take note, most African countries see the diasporan population as a population to be exploited. Amazonians will treat a diasporan population as an asset. It means if you hurt an Amazonian in Thailand, the government has an obligation to go to Thailand and make sure you take care of that Amazonian. In return, we will ask the diasporan Amazonian to pay a citizen's tax. It could be $100 a year. That will give the possibility for free education. That money will simply be invested for free education. And the Amazonian Board of Education will use that money to ensure it builds the foundation of economic power. Our citizens out of the country, whether with foreign nationality, will become citizens of Amazonia, so that the contribution they make, Amazonia takes credit. The opportunities they create provides opportunities for millions of our people. We want to build an economy that is not based on the dogmatic Keynesian theories that have informed Western liberal marketization systems, where the market is free, unregulated. The power of demand and supply determines everything. We want an economic system where we strengthen the local capabilities, where we educate our people based on the opportunities that abound. Well, as I said, Diboncha alone has the highest amount of rainfall a year in West Africa. In the dry season, Amazonia soil is unproductive. We will capture the water produced in places like Diboncha to make sure that we can still harvest mangoes, we can harvest njamanjama, we can harvest bitter leaf, we can harvest everything in dry season. We increase the opportunities of our mothers. Through that kind of economic program, we will capture also the power of sunlight. We have not even started looking at the vast resources beyond our soil. Take note, Amazonia. The amount of heat of sunlight in Moyoka alone can power Moyoka, our own Silicon Valley. Will develop the system to capture the power of sunlight to power our economy. Take note, during this War of Independence, the Amazonian Institute of Technology has been born. Our soldiers can make rockets. Our soldiers can make IEDs. Our soldiers are doing miraculous things. The economy of the United States took a different turn after World War II because of the innovations that took root during World War II, especially innovations from German scientists who were captured and repatriated to the United States to build the foundation of American technology to be able to land a man on the moon. The Amazonian Institute of Technology is born from the hard work, ingenuity, and creativity of our soldiers. It will lay the foundation of our technology industry. We will not be a country of want. We will not be a country of beggars. Even if we beg, we will beg within the bounds of our own society. An Amazonian should not go hungry. Our soil is fertile. Amazonians are hardworking. Over 120 years of different colonial regimes, we have been creators of opportunities. Those who have traveled out of Amazonia have become entrepreneurs, creating opportunities. They have become business tycoons, creating opportunities. Amazonians are the brightest, finest breed of people, laid to waste by the barbarism of an illegal occupier, invader that took away our country. That is about to change. So when you get up every day on Mondays and you are asked to respect Country Sunday, and you wonder why you should do it, think about the kind of educational system you're going to have. Think about the economic system that will create opportunities. A friend told me a story the other day where before in a society somebody lost 2 fingers. Insurance had to cover just 1 finger. Insurance covered just 1 finger. And they had to put back both fingers. But the person had to make a choice. Which finger should be put back? The person had to make a choice between the sting finger and the ring finger. And the person said, I will prefer my ring finger because that's where my wedding ring sits. That is a choice we don't want to give Ambazonians. If you lose 2 fingers, the health system should be in a position to replace it. A woman shouldn't die every minute at childbirth. You can't go to the hospital and the first thing the doctor asks you tells you is how much you've got to pay. The caregiver should provide care. The kind of health system we want to put in place is one where the state will be responsible. In Norway, where I live, there are less than 5 million people. You think of Norway as a country with a lot of oil. But the difference between Norwegian oil and the oil that we have in Ambazonia is that Norwegian oil is owned by the Norwegian people. Collective ownership. Ambazonian oil is owned by corporate entities. ExxonMobil, Texaco, Shell. It will not happen. It will not happen. It will not happen. My people, I hope I am back. My apologies. I'm not sure what happened, but it seems I lost everyone, or you lost me. In any case, let me conclude this very long outing. Fellow Ambazonians, I would like you to know the kind of country you are fighting, bleeding, and dying for is a country that will put your welfare at the center of the formulation of governmental policies. The kind of political system we want to put in place is one that will never be overthrown. We are not going to copy and paste. We're going to institute a political system that reflects our contextual realities. We are going to make sure Ambazonians have a unique language. As I said before, the Norwegians would have simply adopted Danish, or they would have simply adopted Swedish. But they work extremely very hard to make sure that they have a Norwegian language that reflects their own history, their culture. Ambazonia will not live on borrowed robes. Ambazonia will not fight and bleed and become independent in the image of the Western colonial systems. We will put in place a system that reflects us. My fellow people, going forward, it is critical that Ambazonians across the world do not only commit, rededicate to the liberation and the defense of our independence, but take active part in that liberation. Ambazonians, take note, Cameroonians are being used by Cameroon. Ambazonians are being used by Cameroon to provide them with intelligence. Ambazonians living in Cameroon, you must commit to providing support to our fighters on the ground. It is not enough to hope for independence. It is not enough to dream for independence. The gap between hope and reality must be bridged by action. It is not enough to call ground zero 4 times a month to observe Country Sunday. You are unable per month to commit $100 to supply our people with the basic to defend their lives and their integrity. Ask yourself, what is it? How much have you contributed to ensure that Ambazonia is free? Commitment is a measure of our belief of the outcome of our resistance. We will intensify the assault on Cameroon. Thanks to your commitment to the tough program, last month I committed $10,000 a month. It has been moved to $15,000 just for the supply of groundnuts. What our fighters need is the materials to defend themselves. They are the finest men. Come to think about this. No matter how you think about them, from Field Marshal in Le Bialem, General Efan, General RK, General Kata, come to think about it, Commander Cobra, Elvis, the managers, General Hassan, General Kapo, these men have been fighting inside. None of them is at any border where their back is protected by a foreign country. They have been fighting inside. How can they demonstrate bravery for 3.5 years? These generals have been fighting from inside. That shows you their strength. The distance between Bamenda and Bui is a few hundred kilometers. These guys have been battling inside. Inside, they have been battling in Kikaikom. They have been battling in Malindi inside. They are not fighting from outside the country and making incursions. No other struggle has been fought this way. No other generals untrained have demonstrated these abilities to defend from inside. Ambazonians, we should count ourselves lucky. And each day you get up, look at the flag, give your salute, and say, I'm proud to be an Ambazonian. If you've never taken pride in being an Ambazonian, think about the bravery of these men. The battle gendarmes well armed with ammo cars. Let us recommit, rededicate, sacrifice, my people. Freedom is not cheap. Freedom is not cheap, Ambazonians. Talk is cheap. Commit. Every month, commit to tough. The Ambazonian Institute of Technology will make you proud. What we are seeing today, I followed the battles of Ashong, Pinyin, and I was proud of these boys. I was proud. Sometimes we don't sleep. When we hear they are under attack, we are almost like, God, shield them from the evil hands of those who want to take away their lives so they can take away their land. There is so much pressure, my people. Leadership is not easy. But I take pride to be a leader in this generation. At a time when we have been written off, we put Ambazonia back on the map through creative abilities, developing a strategy that projects power, transfer, jurisdiction from domestic to international, stops exploitation of resources. We are moving towards the celebration of our independence on October 1. We are moving towards the sitting of the United Nations General Assembly in September. My people, we have the potential to end Cameroon's tyranny over our country. If you have the men and women to fight, that's all you need. That's all you need. We've been hampered by resources. We've been hampered by resources. The only reason we are still around here is not because of infiltrators. It's not because of Cameroon. We lack the basic resources to provide our men and women with the materials to end Cameroon's nightmare in our land. That is why I have called on you to become the primary investors in your own liberation, so that you can own the outcome. Amazonia will be a better place. All those who've gone before us, your names will be written in the history books of our country as those who invested their lives and treasures to make sure we create a space for us and our generations yet unborn. Amazonia will be a place that will provide for its own people a sanctuary, opportunities. Amazonia will be a place that will provide for its neighbors a place to be proud of, a place whose system they could replicate. Amazonia will be an anchor of stability in the Gulf of Guinea. Amazonia will be a custodian of our tradition, our customs, our values, our norms, giving Africans, wherever they may be, pride in their color, in their heritage, and in their ethnicity. So if somebody dies on the street of the United States of America, you can look down in one small country in the west of Africa and call it home. That's why we fight. We want to make that space a beacon of hope for millions of people yet unborn, for all those sweltering under the heat of injustice and segregation across the globe, those whose only crime is the color of their skin. We want to make a space within which, if you get tired living out here, you look back and hope you return there and find peace. We want to give millions of you scattered across different capitals a place to call home, a country to dwell in peace. We want to give our mothers, our grandmothers, our fathers, our brothers and sisters, transform their uncertainties into certainties, transform their hopelessness into hope, turn their darkness into light, give them a place to dwell in peace. Let these Nyamfukas across the border know this, and know this today. You will bludgeon every Amazonian in the territory. Take all of us, our lives in the diaspora, to lay claim over our land. Just the act of laying claim over our land is a crime which we will confront. We don't simply fight to create a space. We fight for our lives, for our survival, for our dignity. We don't simply fight for a country called Amazonia. We fight for ideals of freedom like democracy, transparency, the right to vote, opportunities, good healthcare, and economic system that gives us opportunities to live with dignity. I hear Black Lives Matter. It doesn't matter without dignity. Our lives matter only with dignity. We can't live again simply like carcasses begging to be Cameroonians, begging to worship their paraphernalias. We have insisted with our blood and our dedication to live in dignity. That is why we fight. And Amazonians, don't be derailed. Don't be confused by the manipulation of the international system. We got them trapped. We understand them. They know who we are. We aren't here because of them. We are here because of your commitment, your sacrifice, your daring. We lost 2 soldiers yesterday. We got 1 wounded today. When we think about their sacrifices, they should know we will not relent until the last forces of Cameroon are kicked out of our country. You will have a better place. You will have time of governance, time to choose your leaders, time to develop your own political system. We should fight hard as stupid so our prisoners can go home. They can go home to their families, to their parents, husbands to their wives, wives to their husbands, brothers to their brothers, sisters to their sisters. We should fight harder so that our lives in exile should come to an end. We should fight harder so we should be respected. We should be seen as people with dignity. You can be rest assured. With my leadership, Ambazonia is free. Trust in everything we do. Recommit and rededicate. God bless you all. Thanks for your time. Happy Independence Day in advance. Let's work harder to make sure that what we showed you from Bello to Batibo to Bafut, our soldiers will be able to march with our flags, raising them higher, singing our anthem, taking pride of the colors of our flag and of being Ambazonians. Thank you very much and good night.